Yeah, this is easily one of the strangest PCs that I've ever seen. The whole thing is contained in this keyboard, including a tiny little screen that displays your Windows XP desktop. It's a computer I've been trying to get my hands on for a while, and I finally found one, so let's talk about it. Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. So to all the DankPods fans out there, go ahead and have your moment because I know the comments are coming. Yes, this is an Eee PC. Specifically, it's the ASUS Eee Keyboard PC from 2010. And I gotta thank Ken from the Computer Clan for sending this out to me. He did a history video on the entire Eee PC line last year, which you should definitely go check out. And he ended up getting this unit from a viewer in Austria. So you can see it has the quartz keyboard layout and some German stickers up here. And like I said, this is something I've been wanting to get my hands on for a while because the design is just so fascinating to me. Now, of course, having an entire computer housed inside a keyboard isn't anything new. This was a thing way back in the days of 8-bit micros like the Commodore 64, minus the screen, of course. But you don't really see this design anymore these days, and the fact that this is an entire system instead of just a peripheral for another computer makes it even more odd, and I think it's going to be really fun to mess around with in this video. But first, we gotta talk about the hardware a little bit. So this thing houses an Intel Atom CPU clocked at 1.6 GHz. It has 1 GB of RAM as well as a 16 GB solid-state drive, though there was also an upgraded 32 GB model available, all for the price of $599. And I'll bring in a regular old keyboard here to compare it with, and you can see that it is pretty much the exact same size as one, and the touchscreen over here is pretty much on par with the size of a numpad, but you can see that for the actual keys over here, they did modify the layout and make it look more like something you would find on a laptop. For ports, all of those are located on the top of the device, so I'll go ahead and flip it around here so you can see. So going from left to right, we've got wireless antenna connections, 3 USB 2.0 ports, a power port, battery switch, headphone and microphone jacks, Ethernet, as well as HDMI and VGA for hooking up an external display to this thing, which I would imagine is the way you would want to be using this computer most of the time. And when you have an external display hooked up, the touchscreen over here can actually be used as a trackpad for moving the mouse cursor around. But you would certainly get a lot more attention if you were using the built-in display to make some edits to a Word document, or look something up on Google real quick, or maybe even try and play a couple of games on this thing, which of course is something we'll be trying later on in this video. But first, let me get this thing turned on so we can take a look at the software on it. Right after a quick word from today's sponsor, TryHackMe, who teaches you real-world cybersecurity skills through hands-on training. If you've ever wanted to learn how to hack something, this is the way to do it, because their lessons use real virtual machines to create simulated environments. Like this one, where you try to hack into a fictional bank to discover vulnerabilities, something you'd actually be hired to do as an ethical hacker. Everything runs right in your browser, so there's no need to download anything, and the lessons walk you through exactly what you're supposed to do, step by step. It makes learning this stuff really fun, and they've got many different paths to choose from, all of varying difficulties. So there's something for every skill level, no matter if you're a complete beginner or someone already working in the field wanting to improve your skills. Over 6 million people already use TryHackMe to learn cybersecurity, and it's trusted by some of the largest organizations and businesses. Plus, you can get started for completely free, but their premium plan unlocks much more, including access to all of their learning paths. And if you click the link below and use my code MJD25 at checkout, you'll get 25% off an annual subscription. So be sure to give them a try, and huge thanks to TryHackMe for making this video possible. So while this thing's booting up, you can see one of the little quirks of having a display of this odd aspect ratio is the fact that the initial boot process shows up as rotated here. So if you want to get into the BIOS and modify the settings, you will have to look at this thing at a little bit of an awkward angle. But once you boot into the Windows install, it shows up in the correct orientation. This is a German install of Windows XP. Of course, that makes sense with it being sold originally in Austria. However, there is still a good bit of English in this ASUS specialized software interface here. This runs directly on top of the Windows XP install, and it just makes it a little bit easier for you to navigate around and open up things like a web browser. You see you've got some shortcuts to some websites right here. There are some games and some multimedia applications on here. There's some settings that you can modify, and right here is how you get access to the regular Windows XP desktop. Now the interesting thing about this is the resolution actually extends beyond the length of the screen, so you have these controls up here that you can use to move around. So you can tap this right arrow to get to the far right edge of the screen, and then do the same thing with the left there, and that center button is how you switch back to the ASUS touchscreen interface. And you can also hit this home button right here at any time to go back to this main web screen. Now I do want to show you a couple of things in this interface. Like I mentioned, it's got a web browser. This is just like an IE based embedded thing, so it just shows up a little bit better on this display. And we could go, I don't think I have this thing on the internet currently, but we can go over to like google.com or something. One of the funny things, and I'm assuming this was changed over at some point, but Windows is currently recognizing this keyboard as a QWERTY keyboard instead of the quartz layout. So you can see here that Z is actually showing up as Y, and Y is showing up as Z, and these keys over here are just how they show up on a regular QWERTY keyboard. Something else that's kind of cool is you have this custom front end for Windows Live Messenger. If that was still a thing, we could probably sign in and see your buddy list and everything. And then you have one for Skype as well, though apparently Skype is not installed. Maybe it came with this originally and somebody uninstalled it at some point. I don't know, but yeah, it just shows that error message at the moment. And then of course you just have a bunch of shortcuts to various websites down here. You have an RSS reader there. This next tab down here is labeled Fun, and of course when I think of fun, I think of some generic file browsers for photos, music, and videos. That's what these appear to be. So you can go up a directory, go into the C drive, and you can browse around for media in there. And you've got ASUS Vibe Lite, which at one point appears to have been a media store. It kind of sounds like it was something like the iTunes store or something similar where you could purchase like music and videos and games and stuff. It does not exist anymore, so when you try to launch it, it just doesn't do anything. So yeah, there's a complaining about not being able to connect to the server. You can open this on the Windows XP desktop as well, and it does the same thing. You also have Sudoku, Joule Shooter, Golf, and then you have a shortcut to the Windows desktop in here. So we'll open up the Joule Shooter, why not? I've actually not taken a look at this before. And every time it changes the resolution, it comes up with this message letting you know that that's what it's doing. Well, I've never heard of this company or this website, but yeah, Joule Shooter 1.0, okay. So let's see, what's this gonna be? We got some jewels, and I guess we're gonna have to, do you tap on the screen? Well, you move your finger to the left and right to move around. Let's try hitting spacebar. Yeah, okay, so that's how you launch the jewels, and this is going to be one of these games where I did a really bad job there, but you have to, match them together, and then you get rid of clusters of them at a time. So we'll move the red one a little bit over here. It's not the most intuitive thing, moving your finger to the left and right on this touchscreen. I mean, it is doable, but it's definitely not my preferred way of using this. When I was messing around with this earlier, it was much easier to just have a USB mouse plugged in and just using that to navigate around, especially when you get to the Windows desktop, because right-clicking, I still haven't figured out how to do that. You tap to click, but I've tried to hold my finger down to right-click. It doesn't really seem to do anything, so we'll have to kind of take a look at that once we switch over to the interface. But anyways, I'm rambling like I always do. That's Joule Shooter. We'll go ahead and hit done. And we'll hit the home key to get out of that, once again getting that display change in progress message in the process, and we're back here at the web category. So this is your tools and setting category. So you got things like Wi-Fi settings and time. The funny thing about time is you can't change the date from in here. So you see set time is the only option. We can change that around if I can actually tap on the button, and then you hit OK. And yeah, you can't change the date, so you have to do that from the Windows desktop date and time settings, or just from the BIOS, which I will have to do if I want to get this thing online and mess around with that for a little bit. Of course, you have a volume slider right here. You can hear the Windows XP little error sound playing just like it does when you adjust the sound from the regular XP desktop interface. You have an alarm, a shortcut to the Windows desktop, a note-taking application, help information, calculator, calendar, and over here you have your ultra-wideband settings, and that's actually what this TV button here corresponds to. That's how you can take advantage of the ultra-wideband adapter in this thing. The most interesting thing that I find about this is there's not a numpad application. Even when you have a display connected, there's not a way to use this touchscreen as a numpad. I don't really understand why they didn't include that, but yeah, it's just not a thing in here. Next up is the learning category. So you've got a dictionary, you have a learning Chinese application, Me Reader, which is an ebook reader, as well as this typing practice game. Ken actually demonstrated this a little bit in his video. It's a pretty simple game where you're just spelling out words on the keyboard, or typing them out rather is the proper way to say that. I'm at a terrible angle here, so I'm not really doing this super well. At least that's the excuse that I'm using. And once again, the system is currently recognizing this as a QWERTY keyboard, so this is actually how that I noticed that, because let's just hit home here and go back, because I was just typing as I do naturally, and I'm like, wait a second, this is showing up as Y instead of Z. So yeah, like I said, that was changed at some point. You have a news program, a world time clock thing. We'll go in here, and I actually haven't been in this one yet. So yeah, you got a whole bunch of clocks, and you can go, is there like a maximum, or can you add, like, is this going to add a new page? Let's put in New York and check that. Okay. And that will just make a new page for us, and then you can continue adding, you know, I guess however many clocks you want, or maybe there's a limit, but we'll go back to the home interface here. And yeah, you may be wondering what this button here on the far left does. This is not accessible unless you have an external display plugged in. So let me plug in this HDMI cable and I'll show you just what this interface does. So as soon as you plug it in, it will come up with a display change in progress message again. You also heard the new connection sound from Windows XP. And now if we go back to this interface, we have a whole bunch of settings here. So what this does is it basically acts as a little launch pad for opening up applications on the connected display. So if I tap Music Player, for instance, you'll see it'll do that like upward animation, and then it opens up Windows Media Player. And now you see I have some controls down here for playing and pausing music, going to the next and previous track, stopping. This opens up that same file browser we saw before where you could pick a playlist or a file to play. And I don't think all of these do that. Like I think for Messenger, I think this just brings up, yeah, the regular trackpad interface. So this right here is how I can move my finger around on this, and you see the cursor moving around on the screen. You can even, and you just saw it here, if I go over to the right, it will bring the cursor onto this display down here. But this is really only useful when you have a USB mouse plugged in so you can get access to both of these displays. Doesn't really make much sense to do this when you are using this touchscreen as the mouse. But yeah, you have left click and right click buttons here. This is your scroll wheel. And then you got a few shortcuts up here for like closing the current application and whatnot. You've got a couple other buttons there. This is your home key for going back to the main screen. And you can see you've got a handful of applications that you can launch here, even things like Spider Solitaire. But you can also just get to this touchpad interface by pressing this new button here on the top right. That will only appear when you have an external display connected. So yeah, that is pretty much this whole interface here. Let me go ahead and swap over to the Windows desktop. I'll also disconnect the external display. You can see here it will actually warn you and say that it will do that anyways when you switch to the Windows desktop, so we'll say yes. And we'll go ahead and disconnect the HDMI cable there. So I am going to plug in a USB mouse at this point just to make it a little bit easier for me to navigate around the desktop. So we'll plug that in, and I'm going to try to kind of hide this cable the best that I can. And yeah, one of the things I find interesting is if we go here into display properties and go to our settings, you can see that it currently reports the resolution as 768 by 1024, which is a 3:4 aspect ratio. That is actually not correct. This system is currently running at 600 by 800, and it is not set to 8-bit color either. Now this is the only resolution option available, so if I click here and try to like drag the slider, you can see it won't let me do that, but if we hit apply, it will change the resolution and apply 8-bit color. So now you can see I have to move around in like all four corners to see the entire display. But if we were to switch back to the touch-centric interface, it will change the resolution back to what it was running at before, though the only thing that gets retained is the color setting. So you can see now we're in 8-bit color, so it looks pretty awful. If I go back to Windows Desktop, though, you see it will set us back to, again, the same resolution. But I am going to go in here and just change the resolution, or the color rather, to 32-bit. We'll have to apply that, go back to the other interface, and then switch back to the Windows Desktop. And now you can see we are back here. Now there is this ASUS display settings application for changing the resolution as well, but you can see there's no other display setting right now without another monitor being plugged in, and we can't modify any of these settings anyways. But here is where it says the correct 600 by 800 32-bit 60 hertz information there. So yeah, we're just going to hit OK to get out of that. Now there are a handful of third-party applications installed on this thing, most of them being under this ASUS Eee Keyboard PC folder. Some of these we took a look at, like here's the display settings, the ASUS Vibe application. You also have web storage. This is like a cloud storage thing that, believe it or not, still actually exists. I mean, maybe not in the same form, but it still is a thing that ASUS offers. You've got an updater program. You have IQ Chinese. This is the learning Chinese program we saw before. The dictionary, the ebook reader. You have Super Hybrid Engine, which is basically, this is a little system tray application down here that you can change between super performance mode, high performance mode, power saving mode, or auto mode. I guess we'll just put it to super performance mode to increase the performance a little bit, I guess. Also in here you've got an ArcSoft program. This is Total Media Theater 3. I feel like that's kind of a requirement to come with like any OEM system from this time period. Easy mode is just the name of the ASUS software interface, though when you launch this, it doesn't actually switch to it. That's just a system tray application down here. You can click on that to have another way to change back between these two interfaces. A couple other interesting things. It looks like at one point there was Windows Live Messenger as well as Yahoo widgets installed. Both of these just are shortcuts that don't work anymore, so maybe those were installed by one of the people who use this thing at some point and then removed, but the rest of these are pretty much just your standard Windows folders. You do have Microsoft Works. You have what I believe is a Microsoft Office 2007 60-day trial. You have some games. These actually do not open up here in just the regular Windows mode. This is the Sudoku and the typing game that we saw earlier. But if you were to launch it from here, it just won't do anything. You have to be in that easy mode interface. Another interesting thing we have here on the desktop, at least for me as somebody who doesn't live in the EU, this is the browser choice program that the European Union required Microsoft to include on Windows systems beginning in 2010. This was basically a response to Microsoft bundling Internet Explorer with Windows and thereby increasing its market share. This was a pretty hot topic here in the US as well, although the American Justice Department basically gave Microsoft a slap on the wrist and did not require them to actually, do anything about this. But in the EU, Microsoft had to include this program that this first screen here basically tells you what a web browser is and that you have a choice in using a different one. And this site does not exist anymore, but when you go and just hit the X here, it would have brought up browserchoice.eu, where it would show you a bunch of different download links to other web browsers. There you go. That is, I think, all of the applications and stuff that I wanted to talk about. Now we can get into the fun part, which of course is trying to see if we can run a couple games on this thing. Of course, if you guys are familiar with this channel, you probably know the Half-Life rule by now, so yeah, we're going to be trying to run this on here, but I also have this copy of Command & Conquer Red Alert 3 that was fittingly originally sold in Europe, so yeah, we will try out both of these games here after I connect this USB DVD-ROM drive to the Keyboard PC, so let me plug that on in. And this game should have no problem running on this computer. The specs far exceed the minimum system requirements, so this is more of a let's do this thing just so that we can do this thing, which is literally, if this channel had a tagline, that would probably be it. Actually, I do wonder about the free space on this drive, because like I mentioned, this thing only has a 16 gigabyte drive. We currently have 5.21 gigabytes of free space, so that shouldn't be a problem for Half-Life, but let me check Red Alert 3 here. This requires 10 gigabytes of hard drive space. That, yeah, okay, maybe we won't be able to do this. Although I guess I could try and plug in like an external drive and we could install it on there. But this needs exactly 1 GB of RAM as a minimum, which this system does have. And it also needs 256 megabytes of video memory and a 2.2 gigahertz or faster processor. So yeah, we don't meet that requirement, but hey, we'll see if maybe we can work something out. But anyways, let us run the Half-Life setup executable, rather. Setup has determined that some system components may be less than requirements. In this case, it looks like it is the resolution. Although, well, it thinks that the resolution is lower, it's just because the, I think that's because the color mode is just, it can't be properly recognized or whatever. Because it just shows that long number there. Let's just say, no, we don't want any more information. Yes, we want to continue the setup process. And we'll just go through here. I guess I'm not going to bother moving the window around. Alright, well that's done. It dropped Sierra Utilities in our start menu. So we'll hit OK. Not going to bother checking for updates, not going to bother registering, and yeah, we're going to launch Half-Life. Now, I'm most interested in seeing how it's going to display this game with the whole display setup that we have here. Will it just rotate? Probably not. Will it display just the part of the game that displays on the portion of the screen that we're currently viewing? Probably yes, but let me enter the key here and we'll find out. Oh, wait a minute, it did rotate. Okay, well, I did not think it was going to do that. Cool. Okay. I guess we're going to have to play this game a little bit awkwardly, but we'll just go to the hazard course because I don't really want to sit through the entire Black Mesa transit system sequence, unfortunately. I will just rotate this in post, but yeah, I'm going to have a lot of fun. I'm going to have to like tilt my head here just to be able to move around. Oh my gosh, this is like unbearable. But yeah, let's step into the suit. Come on. There we go. So we'll get into our suit here. I mean, the game, of course, is going to run totally fine. It's probably running just in the software mode right now. So let's go to video. Yeah, it's currently under software, but we can change that. Like, what about Direct 3D? Will it show any options in here? And we'll choose 800 by 600. Yeah, look at that. Totally fine. So here's the hazard course. You guys have probably seen this a fair bit. I'm going the wrong way. Let's go back here. And we're just going to kind of ignore what they're saying because I've done this so many times. But, oh yeah, so Half-Life runs on the Keyboard PC. I'm just kind of narrating at this point because there's not really a whole lot to talk about. I mean, I guess we can play the game a little bit here. But I do want to save most of this whole section of the video for Command & Conquer Red Alert 3 because we haven't gotten to take a look at that game in a video yet. I tried to take a look at it in the Windows 7 phone video, but it did not install on it at all, and I just ended up cutting that whole portion out. So why don't we just immediately switch over to that and see how well we can get that running. But does it pass the Half-Life rule? Heck yeah, it does. So let's see about Command & Conquer Red Alert 3. We'll take Half-Life out. We will put this game into the DVD drive. I can guarantee you the first thing it's going to do is complain about not having enough disk space. Nope, never mind. It's going to complain about not having the product key entered. Let me change that. Alright, we'll accept the terms. We'll accept the terms again. And our best bet is going to be using this SATA to USB adapter here, which, yes, I know means that we're going to be using this thing over USB 2.0. But, I mean, what other choice do I have? Unfortunately, the solid-state drive, as well as the RAM, are soldered to the motherboard, so they're not easily upgradable by the user at all. I mean, I'm sure DOSUD1 would be able to figure it out, but yeah, so we're just going to have to put this thing on this external drive, which I do need to actually configure here. And that's done. Awesome. So, do we have to restart the setup, or do you think it will just recognize the other drive in here now? I believe this is just a regular file picker, right? So, change the drive. Yep, there it is. And we'll hit OK. Cannot install the selected directory because it may cause the system to become unstable. What? Okay, I guess I gotta make a new folder. That's probably the problem. It just switched back to the C drive, I think. So we'll go here, call it RA3. Alright, yeah, that worked. So we'll hit next and install. And there we got a shortcut for Command & Conquer Red Alert 3. So let's run it. Oh my god, look at this nonsense. This is asking us to connect the computer to the internet so it can verify the game ownership status. So I am going to have to change, because yeah, the system date is way off. So let's set this to the current date of not 2045. Jesus, okay. It is currently November 21st. We'll just leave it at 5 a.m. That's fine. All right, we got the network connected. There's no freaking way this is going to work. I mean, seriously, like, I'm going to be so surprised if EA actually supports something as legacy as this. But let's see. Why it needs to do this is so... Yeah, of course it's not going to work. Alright, now we get a slightly different error message that says there appears to be problems connecting to the licensing server. Of course, because it's probably non-existent anymore. So yeah, like, even with the patch applied, it's still not going to work, which is just freaking fantastic. I honestly think I'm just going to give up on doing this. I'm sure, like, maybe somebody's out there come up with a solution for this, but I'm not going to give EA the satisfaction of trying to troubleshoot this and just waste a bunch of time that I'm not going to be able to get back just to try and run this game, even though I do genuinely want to try it out. But I'll have to do some looking into this maybe in a future video to see if we can even use this game as like a test application for these videos where I try to install games and stuff on older computers to mess around. But hey, we got Half-Life to work on this thing, so that's something. And I think that is honestly a pretty decent stopping point for this video, because holy cow, has this raw recording gone on much longer than I originally intended. But there you have it. That is the ASUS Eee Keyboard PC, a really, really fascinating and just weird computer that for some reason had to exist. If I'm being honest, I just really don't see the point for why this thing needed to be created. I mean, yes, it is cool. It's kind of a callback to the way that computers used to be back in the days of 8-bit micros, but it's just like not very functional. You know, if you wanted a portable computer that you could carry around with you and hook up to an external display every so often, you could just get like any mid-range laptop from this time period and you'd be able to do that just fine. It would probably have better specs than this thing too, and would be around the same price or maybe a little bit cheaper. This thing, like, would definitely get some attention. Like, you would get people asking you about this if you were sitting in an airport or in an office, like, typing on this thing and looking down at this tiny display. And yes, it is kind of cool that you can use the display as a trackpad when you have it connected to an external monitor, but I just don't really see a wide range of applications where this thing could be used effectively. So the amount of people that actually purchased one of these computers is just incredibly small, and that's probably why these are pretty hard to find these days. I mean, it took me a while. I was looking months back. I posted on my community tab just asking if anybody had one that they would be willing to sell, and that didn't turn up anything, unfortunately. But then I saw that Ken, a couple weeks ago, posted about selling his, and I reached out and was able to get it, which I want to thank Ken very much again for sending this out to me for a very reasonable price. Really appreciate that. And that is pretty much going to wrap it up for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Definitely be sure to give it a thumbs up and get subscribed if you did. If you really liked it, maybe consider becoming a patron or a channel member to get early sponsor-free access to these videos before anybody else. But either way, I just want to thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.